I was blessed with coming to know Jesus at a young age. I gave my life to Christ when I was in third grade. And I can remember I went to a Baptist church in Lakeside, California, outside of where I lived in Santee. And it was, we had a screaming Baptist pastor and Pastor Wheeler. And I remember that he had no problem with the whole hellfire and damnation thing. And so he knew that preached on hell one day. And I knew that if I didn't want to go to hell, I needed to give my life to Christ. And so I did. And after that, I was told that, okay, Dan, now that you're a Christian, remember I'm in third grade, right? That now you have to take that next step and you have to become a disciple. And I heard a lot about that in church, that you have Christians and then you have disciples, as though those who are disciples are somehow higher up in the pecking order of Christianity. And so this was important to me. So I'm a competitive person. I wanted to be up higher. And so I kept asking, okay, what do I need to do to become a disciple? And so churches had discipleship programs. And where if you go through this program, you will be discipled, and then you will eventually become that mystical person of being a disciple. And it tended to be classes that if you learn more things, if you studied more scripture, if you memorized more verses, then somehow at that point you could become a disciple, or you're along the discipleship process. And what was reinforced to me over and over again was that discipleship was a program. It was something that you did. It was something that you learned so that you could be more in tune with God or something. The problem with that was that I couldn't find that anywhere in scripture. And even up through my teens and even into my early 20s, when I was in the Army, I kept looking through the scripture. Okay, I want to be a disciple. I want to be somebody who pleases God. And you're supposed to be discipled. So what does this look like? And I would scour the scriptures, and I could not find anything that was even close to what I learned in church growing up. But I did find incredible examples of discipleship taking place in scripture. And in fact, I can remember reading in Deuteronomy chapter 6 for the first time. And maybe it may have been the first time I read it, but the first time it really began to hit me and to sink in was that God was giving Moses this discipleship program for the children of Israel. And this is, as you know, Deuteronomy is the actual, it's the covenant document that God gave them. And in this, after he gives them the 10 commandments in chapter 5, in chapter 6, he says, now, Moses, I want you to tell this to the people of Israel so that they can disciple their children and that they can be people of God when they go into the land. And I want you to hear what he has to say. It's a passage that many of you probably know. If you've been around me at all, you've heard it many times. It's in Deuteronomy chapter 6. It begins in verse 4, and I'm going to read down through verse 9, and I'm reading from the ESV. It says, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your might. And these words that I command you today shall be on your heart. You shall teach them diligently to your children, and shall talk of them when you sit in your house, and when you walk by the way, and when you lie down, and when you rise. And you shall bind them as a sign on your hand, and they shall be as frontlets between your eyes. And you shall write them on the doorpost of your house and on your gates." And so here in this passage, God is giving the children of Israel through Moses the ultimate strategy for discipleship. And if you notice, there is no notebook. There is no spiritual notebook here. There is no class that you go through. He says, Moses, teach the children of Israel that while you're going on your way, while you are living your life, I want you to teach your children to love me. That the most important thing that you can do is to love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. So in other words, he says, Moses, I want you to teach the children of Israel to pass on a passion for me to their children. And so often we think of discipleship as passing on a system of what you need to do. And if you do these things, you're going to be closer to God. Now the system may not be bad. Okay, the system that God gave Israel in the law was not bad. In fact, Jesus himself said that the law was good. But the problem was that if you only had the law, you were not going to get closer to God. It says, I want you to teach your children as you're going on your way to love me, to talk about this as you're going in, as you're going out, to put this on, on your doorpost. In our days, we've been put it on the refrigerator door that they are to love the Lord their God. And then he gave them standing stones, and he gave them many different things that they could do, that they could use life. So in other words, what he's telling them is that as you're walking through life, fathers and mothers, that and you have an opportunity to talk to your children about God and about what it means to love him, I want you to take that opportunity, because that's the way that they're going to learn the best. And then I saw that Jesus picked up on this pattern when he was working with his disciples. That one of the things I noticed in the Gospels is that there really is no course. There is no class that Jesus taught. Now, he taught on the Sermon on the Mount and the Olivet Discourse and other places where he preached, yes, and the scripture does tell us that he taught the people, but when he was dealing with his disciples, he let life be the curriculum. And so Jesus was a master at walking through life and using what he found as a teaching tool. And so, for example, as he was trying to teach his disciples in Matthew 13 about the kingdom and all the kingdom parables, that the first thing he tells them is, okay, guys, you're going to make a difference here. You guys are going to change the world. And so, but you need to understand that what you're going to do is going to start small. Just like this mustard plant. This mustard bush that we see here that is growing up and is sprouting all over, and the birds of the air are finding shade underneath it. But it starts as a very small seed. And so you need to understand that the movement that you're going to begin, the movement that's going to change the world, is going to start very small. And it did. We could argue it started with 120 people in an upper room someplace. That from there, that they branched out and they literally changed the known world. And then he also says, okay, now when you're doing this, as you're going along your way, you'll see this farmland here that this farmer is preparing for planting. That you need to make sure that you are that you are preparing the soil so that when the word is sown, that it would be able to grow. And he says that the farmer went out and he sowed seed, and some of it fell on rocky ground, and some of it fell on thorny ground, and some of it fell on good ground, and the one that fell on the good ground is the one that grew. And so we think of that as the parable of the seeds, but actually it's the parable of the soils. And so what Jesus is teaching his disciples as they're walking along looking at this farmland, that they could see wherever they were, as they were walking, they were in an agrarian society. He says, guys, just like this farmer prepares his soil so that when the seed falls on and he gets a good harvest, you need to make sure that when you are out teaching and when you are out proclaiming me when I'm gone, that you're preparing the soil. And so what I would encourage you today is that parents and grandparents and uncles and aunts and just people in the church, when you are, as you are dealing with life and as you're walking down the way, take the time and try to be aware of those moments that God gives you so that you can share a passion for God. Because one of the things that we find with the children of Israel, and I think we find this with the churches as well, we look at that in our Revelation chapters 2 and 3 about the churches, is that so many of these churches started out well. And then Jesus has to give them the warning on 5 of the 7, that if you don't straighten up here, I'm going to pull your lampstand, you're going to close down. And all of them had one thing in common, that they started out with a passion, but they began to pass on a system for God and not a passion for God. And so because of that, they had this downward spiral. And of course, the children of Israel, the book of Judges explains that downward spiral to us in graphic detail. And so if we want to make sure that our children are going to be following the Lord, if we're going to do whatever we can, we need to create an environment that's conducive for growth. And that is, as we are going on our way, to teach people how to reflect Jesus the way that we do. And I am convinced that if we do that, that we'll have a much better chance of not only reaching our community, but more importantly, to be able to reach our sphere of influence and make a difference for the cause of Christ. And so for the next couple of sessions that we have here, I'm going to talk about just some of the mentors that I've had in my life that have encouraged me, that have taught me how to be a better leader, how to taught me how to reflect Jesus better. So in all facets of life, so we can kind of get an idea what I'm talking about. So I hope you have a wonderful weekend, and I look forward to speaking to you again soon. So take care, all.